I haven't left yet. That's what he said to me. On our 15th wedding anniversary. No build-up, no fight, no dramatic pause. Just said it like he was commenting on the weather or reminding me to pick up eggs. I remember standing there in our stupid little kitchen, one hand wrapped around the stem of my wine glass, wearing the only dress I had left that didn't make me feel invisible. I just pulled his favorite scotch from the cabinet, because I'm an idiot, I guess, and I turned around right as he said it. I didn't flinch. I didn't ask him what the hell he meant. I just smiled like a damn politician, handed him the drink like nothing had happened, and said, "Happy anniversary." Then I turned around, walked into the dining room, and sat down like I hadn't just been gutted. He followed, drink in hand, completely oblivious to the hurricane starting to form in the center of my chest. He started talking about his day, something about a sales rep messing up a quote, and how nobody at his office could function without him. He loved talking about how indispensable he was. How important. Meanwhile, I sat across the table, watching the man I married 15 years ago become someone I couldn't recognize anymore. Or maybe I'd been refusing to see it for a long time. The thing is, Rick wasn't always like this. I mean, he was never a prince or anything, but he used to laugh with me. We used to go to dive bars and argue about movie endings. We used to lie in bed on Sunday mornings and talk about what we'd do when the kids grew up. Somewhere along the way, though, he started looking at me like I was a chore. Like I was the broken lamp he kept meaning to replace, but never quite got around to. And I let him. God help me, I let him. Last year, on my birthday, he forgot. Not just forgot to get me something, he forgot it was even my birthday. I spent that whole day cleaning up after his barbecue party for work friends, thinking maybe he had something planned for later. Nope. He got drunk, passed out on the couch, and the next morning, when I said something, he actually laughed and said, "You're not big on birthdays anyway, right?" Then there was the time I had the flu and couldn't get out of bed. He asked if I could still make it to Emma's parent-teacher conference because he had a poker night. Poker night. I drove myself with a fever of 102 and a puke bucket in the passenger seat. When I got home, I found him passed out in front of the TV with half a pizza and a beer still in his hand. That was 6 months ago. So when he looked me in the eye and said, "You're lucky I haven't left yet," I knew right then and there, he doesn't think I'll ever leave. Not because he's worth staying for. No, he thinks I'll stay because I'm too scared to leave. Because I don't have a plan. Because he's convinced I'm just a tired, middle-aged woman who needs him more than he needs me. That's when something inside me went very, very still. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was quiet. Like the world just stopped spinning for a moment, and I could finally see everything for what it was. I watched his mouth move as he kept rambling about work, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was somewhere else. Somewhere calmer. I started thinking about all the small things I'd let slide over the years, all the disrespect I had repackaged as, "He's just tired," or, "Men don't think like that." He started scrolling through his phone during dinner, barely touching the steak I made. Didn't notice the candles, the tablecloth, or the playlist I spent an hour curating. He didn't even ask how my day was. Just checked out completely, like I was a waitress in a diner he didn't even want to tip. After dinner, I cleaned up alone, of course. He said he was going to get some emails done, which was code for locking himself in the basement with YouTube and a bottle. I stood at the sink, washing the dishes we'd bought with wedding gift money 15 years ago, and I thought, he really thinks this is it. That I'll keep playing along. That he can keep disrespecting me in plain sight, and I'll just stay like a good little wife. I dried my hands on the dish towel, walked up to our bedroom, and opened the nightstand drawer. Inside was my old iPad, the one Rick thought had died 2 years ago. I charged it for weeks in secret. Behind his back, like a kid hiding candy. But that tablet still worked. And it had something I'd been slowly building for months without even realizing it. I unlocked it with my fingerprint, opened the Notes app, and scrolled to the folder labeled Project Freedom. There it was. A list of passwords, bank account numbers, contact info for a lawyer a friend had recommended. A few ideas for where I could live, what I could sell, who I could trust. I hadn't planned on using it. I really hadn't. But after what he said tonight, it wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a countdown. He went to bed that night snoring like nothing was wrong. He didn't ask if I was okay, didn't even look at me. I lay beside him, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, counting backwards from 30. Not for any real reason. Just to keep from screaming. When he finally turned over and muttered something in his sleep, I looked at him and thought, "You're the lucky one, Rick." But that luck's about to run out. The next morning, I poured Rick his coffee just the way he liked it, black with a splash of cream, no sugar, in the mug he'd stolen from his old job that says "World's Best Boss," even though he's not anyone's boss and never has been. He didn't say thank you. Just grunted, took the mug, and shuffled into the living room to watch the news like nothing in the world had changed. He didn't know that the night before, I had opened a digital notebook full of exit plans. He didn't know that I had made a decision that couldn't be undone. And the beautiful part was, I realized something while sipping my own coffee and pretending to scroll through Facebook. I didn't have to make a dramatic exit. Not yet. I could take my time. I could dismantle this entire mess of a life, piece by piece, right in front of him, and he wouldn't even notice. Later that day, after he left for work and Emma was at school, I drove to a small credit union on the other side of town where nobody knew me by name. I wore sunglasses even though it was cloudy, and I told myself it was just a precaution, just in case someone Rick knew happened to be there. I told the lady at the desk that I wanted to open a checking account, and when she asked if I had a joint account with my husband, I smiled and said, "Not for long." As she clicked through her screen and handed me forms to sign, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. When Rick and I got married, we opened a joint account at my bank, but he had awful credit back then, some unpaid bills from college, a repossessed car, the whole mess, so the account had to be under my name only. At the time, I thought nothing of it. We were married. What's mine is his, right? Except now, what's mine is mine, and what he thinks is his is also mine, legally speaking. That tiny detail became the anchor of my plan. I started small. I added a second Venmo account under my middle name. Every time I went grocery shopping, I used cashback options, $20 here, $40 there. When I sold a few old jackets and a blender on Facebook Marketplace, I deposited the cash into my new account. I even started driving for Instacart a few evenings a week, telling Rick I was volunteering at Emma's school. He barely looked up from his phone when I said it. Every few days, I'd transfer $50 or so from the joint account to pay for groceries or gas, then keep whatever I saved and moved it quietly. It became almost like a game. How much could I squirrel away before he noticed? Spoiler, the man didn't notice a damn thing. One Saturday afternoon, while he was out at the gym, which I now suspect was code for drinking beer with Rob and watching women jog by, I went through the garage and pulled out everything he hadn't used in at least a year. The broken fishing rod, the old camping stove, a rusted box of tools he always said he'd clean. I listed them all on Marketplace, and when he finally noticed the empty shelves 2 weeks later, I told him I donated it to a local charity that helps veterans learn woodworking. That detail wasn't even true, but he nodded and said, "That's nice of you," like I'd handed out socks to the homeless. 6 weeks in, I checked my new bank balance and smiled. After about 6 weeks, I had saved up nearly $3,500, which was more than enough to pay 2 months of rent on a place that cost $1,800 a month. I figured if I could get to $6,000, I'd have first and last month's rent, a moving truck, deposits, and enough breathing room to not panic the second I walked out the door. It felt weird being sneaky, but it also felt like control. Like taking back something I'd let slip away for way too long. Around this time, I started reading books again. I hadn't read for pleasure in years, but I found myself drawn to books about strong women doing impossible things. I downloaded audiobooks and listened while I did laundry, and every time I heard one of those characters make a bold move, I felt something wake up in me. Not rage. Not revenge. Something calmer. Like clarity, but deeper. One night, I was paying the cable bill when I noticed something strange in the online banking feed. A charge at a hotel near Rick's office. Not a chain hotel, either, one of those boutique places with a fake European name and complimentary bathrobes. He hadn't mentioned a work trip. There were no conferences on the calendar. Just a charge for one night and a room service tab. My first instinct was to ask. To catch him off guard and see if he stumbled through a lie. But then I thought, why not let it sit? Why not let him think I didn't notice, just like he thinks I don't notice everything else? So I did something a little insane. I went online and booked a room at that same hotel, same day of the week, 1 week later. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got there. I didn't even know if I'd show up. But I wanted to see what it felt like to stand where he stood. To walk into the same lobby and know I was finally doing something for myself that he didn't control. I didn't tell anyone. Not my sister, not my best friend, not even my phone. Just me and that reservation confirmation, sitting quietly in my inbox like a secret that made me feel powerful. And that was the thing about this whole plan, I wasn't doing it for drama. I wasn't throwing things or screaming or slashing tires. I was taking back control so quietly, so carefully, that he wouldn't even see it coming. Which, if you ask me, is the best kind of revenge. I didn't feel nervous when I pulled into the hotel parking lot, which surprised me, honestly, because I thought there'd be shaking hands or a racing heart or maybe even second thoughts, something dramatic, something more cinematic. But no, just stillness. The same kind of stillness I'd felt the night Rick made his little anniversary toast about how I was lucky he hadn't left. By now I had started to like that feeling, that calm. It wasn't numbness, it was control. It was knowing I was the only one in the room who understood what was really happening. And tonight, I planned on using that calm for something far more satisfying than forgiveness. The girl at the front desk couldn't have been more than 25, maybe younger, with chipped nail polish and a Diet Coke sitting beside her monitor. I made sure my voice was warm but tired, the way women sound when they've been through a day they're trying to forget. I told her I had a reservation under my middle name, Marie, just in case Rick ever went snooping. She typed on the keyboard without looking at me and said they had me in room 408. I smiled and leaned on the counter like I'd done this before, tilted my head just slightly and asked, "Any chance 312's available instead?" I always sleep better in odd-numbered rooms, and I think I stayed there once before. She squinted at the screen and said, "You know, that room's a regular's favorite. But it's free tonight. Let me switch you over." It took every ounce of strength I had not to smirk. I got my key card and walked slowly down the hall, suitcase wheels clicking softly against the tile until I hit the 3rd floor. The air in hotel hallways always smells the same, over-bleached linens and old carpet cleaner, and as I slid the card into the door for 312, I wondered if he'd done the same. If he'd looked over his shoulder like I just had. If he hesitated before walking into a room that wasn't ours, into sheets that weren't mine, to be with someone who hadn't lived through his worst years. Inside, the room looked like every mid-tier hotel room across the country. Beige curtains, a king-sized bed with too many pillows, and a generic canvas print of a lake that probably doesn't even exist. I didn't bother unpacking. I just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the lamp beside it, wondering if this was the same one she'd turned off while he kissed her neck. I wasn't jealous. That would have been too easy. I was studying the anatomy of betrayal. Trying to understand how someone who used to beg you to dance in the kitchen could lie so well without blinking. I opened the drawer of the nightstand and found the usual Bible and a notepad. I took the pad and wrote a single sentence in sharp, deliberate handwriting. "She deserves better. You'll be sleeping at your mom's soon." Then I folded it, slid it under the pillow, and made the bed look untouched. I didn't stay long. Maybe an hour. I took a shower just because I wanted to leave a wet towel hanging on the hook. A sign, maybe, or just a petty little thrill. I walked out of room 312 without looking back. Back in my car, parked in the shadows of the back lot, I logged into our joint account and drained the last few $1,000s into my new one. Every penny we'd saved, every dime I'd earned, every bonus he'd once smugly said he let me spend, it was all mine now. He hadn't checked the statements in months. I figured he'd notice eventually, but by then, I'd be long gone. I called my lawyer next. The papers were already in motion, but I gave the green light for filing, finalizing, and freezing anything else that still had both our names on it. I scheduled the locksmith for the next morning and the car key reprogramming for that afternoon. I made sure to change all my passwords, cancel the Netflix account he mooched from, and remove him from every emergency contact form I could think of, including the schools, which felt oddly liberating. When I got home, Emma was sleeping over at a friend's house, so I had the place to myself. I took down the wedding photo in the hallway, the one where Rick's smiling like he's auditioning for a toothpaste commercial, and I replaced it with a framed drawing Emma made last year that just said, "Mom is strong." I stood there for a long time staring at that picture, thinking about how I'd nearly forgotten that I was, in fact, strong. Not because I stayed, but because I had finally decided to leave. 3 days passed like a dream. Rick hadn't called, which didn't surprise me. He liked to disappear when he thought he was winning. That Friday evening, I was sitting on the couch in sweatpants, eating popcorn out of the bag, when I heard the sound of keys fumbling at the front door. I muted the TV and waited. The lock clicked, then clicked again. Then silence. A pause. Confusion. Then knocking. "Sarah." His voice wasn't angry or demanding, it was unsure, even a little pathetic. I waited a few seconds, then walked calmly to the door and picked up my phone. He called it a moment later. I answered and didn't say a word. He said, "Hey babe, the lock's busted or something. You home?" I took a deep breath, let the silence settle between us, then said with perfect calm, "I told you were lucky I hadn't left yet." And then I hung up. Click. The part no one warns you about is how quiet things get after you finally do the thing you've been thinking about for years. Not quiet like peaceful or meditative, but that charged kind of silence, like the air just before a summer storm. I didn't expect the silence. I didn't expect to sit in my new rental house, sipping lukewarm coffee on a secondhand couch, and feel more alive than I had in the last decade. I also didn't expect Rick to unravel so quickly, but I guess it makes sense. He had built his whole personality on being the one who stayed, the one who tolerated, the one who suffered in noble silence while I, the emotionally unstable wife, apparently needed help, but never sought it. So when the story flipped, when the locks changed, the money vanished, and the doormat finally walked off, he had no script to follow. And that's where things got interesting. He tried to kick things off with a weak attempt at emotional whiplash. He left voicemails ranging from heartbreak to fury, with just a dash of confusion for flavor. "What the hell is going on?" Turned into, "We need to talk for Emma's sake," which quickly morphed into, "This is crazy, you need help," and then, of course, the classic, "You'll regret this." But I didn't respond. Not once. Not even a text. He knocked a few more times that first weekend, but when the neighbors started peeking through their blinds and I turned the porch light off without opening the door, he stopped showing up. Because Rick has always been allergic to looking bad in front of strangers. By Monday, he had taken refuge at his mother's house, which I found darkly poetic. The same mother who used to give me thin-lipped smiles and whispered suggestions like, "Maybe if you dressed up more often," or "Men need to feel admired." The same woman who once sent me a Bible verse printed on a dish towel after Emma was born, as if postpartum depression could be cured with Proverbs. I used to shrink around her, unsure of how much she knew about Rick's behavior or if she simply didn't care. But now I knew exactly what she knew, and I made sure she couldn't pretend otherwise. That Tuesday, I mailed her a manila envelope with no return address, but the handwriting on the label was unmistakably mine. Inside, I placed a cleanly typed cover page titled Receipts. Underneath, I included printouts of every hotel charge Rick had made over the past 6 months for different locations, all booked under his name. I added screenshots of suspicious text messages from unfamiliar numbers, the kind that end with a winky face or the word soon. The piece de resistance was a screenshot of Rick's Tinder profile, which I found thanks to a friend of mine who recognized his photo while swiping in the same city he was working late in. His profile bio actually said, "Just looking for someone who listens." I added a yellow sticky note on top of that one that said, "This is who you raised." Hope your church friends like it. I don't know exactly when she opened it, but the silence from their side of the fence was immediate and beautiful. No more texts. No more phone calls. No more drive-bys in his stupid black truck with the tinted windows and loud muffler. Just the sound of a man trying to convince the world he'd been wronged while desperately hiding the evidence that he hadn't. Meanwhile, I started piecing together a life that actually felt like mine. I signed a lease on a small 2-bedroom rental with just enough charm to make me smile, but not so much that it screamed, "Look at me, I'm thriving." I painted the bedroom walls soft green and bought mismatched coffee mugs from a thrift store because they made me laugh. I started texting friends I hadn't seen in years, people I used to avoid because Rick didn't like them, because he said they were too opinionated or didn't understand marriage. Turns out, those were the people who showed up first, offering wine and moving boxes and hugs that smelled like real shampoo instead of dollar store aftershave. One night, Emma sat across from me on the floor as we assembled her new dresser. She handed me screws while I tried to interpret the IKEA manual like it was written in ancient Greek. She didn't say much until we were almost done. Then she looked at me, tilted her head a little, and asked in that blunt, 12-year-old way, "Why didn't you leave sooner?" I could have lied. I could have blamed the economy or said something vague about timing. But instead, I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Because I wanted him to feel it when I did." She nodded once, then handed me the last screw. I dyed my hair 2 weeks later bright, defiant red. The kind of color that doesn't whisper but shouts. The kind that says, "I've been quiet long enough." At the grocery store, a stranger told me it looked fierce. At the gas station, a man glanced and looked away too quickly. It felt like being born again, but this time with boundaries and a flame-proof heart. Then, late one Thursday night, just before bed, I got an alert on my phone that someone had tried logging into the joint account again. I opened the banking app just to make sure everything was locked up tight. It was. The account balance was exactly 0, and I'd even renamed the account title like a little cherry on top. "Not yours anymore, Rick." I stared at that for a full minute, smiling to myself. I wasn't just gone. I had taken everything he thought I'd never leave with dignity, control, peace, and the ability to sleep through the night without waiting for the next cruel remark disguised as humor. Let him sleep at his mom's. I hope the couch has lumps. The first time I saw him crying, really crying, not the fake crocodile tears he'd use when someone called him out in front of a group or when he was trying to guilt-trip me into letting something slide, but actual, face-contorting sobbing, was on a Tuesday morning, 1 week after the papers landed at his mother's house. I heard his truck before I saw it, the sputtering of the muffler echoing down the street like it didn't know it was too early to be this loud, and I knew instantly he was going to try one last grand performance. That was Rick's favorite game. If you lose, lose big. Lose loud. Make everyone around you feel like they need to apologize for witnessing your failure. I was in the kitchen, making coffee with the French press I bought for myself after the move, one of those tiny indulgences that feels almost sinful when you've spent years drinking reheated drip from a pot your husband never cleaned. The coffee was strong, dark, no sugar, no sweetness, just heat and clarity. I poured it into the mug that said, "Divorced, not dead," which my friend Trina gave me as a joke, though lately I'd grown to love it more than my nicer dishes. When I peeked through the blinds, I saw him in the driveway, hunched over like someone had taken a bat to his knees. He looked thinner, or maybe just more pathetic, like he hadn't slept or eaten anything in days, and honestly, I could believe it. Rick never did well without structure. Without someone to clean up his messes and remind him what time dinner was and whether or not he'd paid the electric bill. He was built for comfort, not consequences. He saw the curtain move and stepped closer, lifting his hand like we were still playing by the old rules, the ones where I'd feel obligated to open the door just because he was physically standing there. But I didn't move. I just stood back far enough that he couldn't make out my expression and watched him try to will me into breaking first. I didn't. He started talking, something about forgiveness and how he missed Emma and how we'd built so much together. He kept his voice low, maybe in case the neighbors were watching, but I could still hear the desperation in every syllable. He said he was sorry. Twice. Then again, a third time, louder, like volume could fix what volume had broken. I didn't open the door. Instead, I turned around, walked back to the kitchen, and sat at the table with my coffee, the blinds still cracked, letting just enough light in to keep me from forgetting he was out there. It felt powerful to choose silence, to not feed the scene, to let him feel the weight of being ignored by the very person who used to bend backward just to keep the peace. Later that afternoon, after he finally left, probably back to his mother's couch and the egg salad sandwiches she still made with crusts cut off, I drove to the post office and dropped a padded envelope in the outgoing bin. Inside were the finalized divorce papers, signed, dated, stapled neatly with instructions on where to send them back. I also included a Starbucks gift card with exactly $5 on it, and a handwritten note on the back of an old receipt that read, "Maybe this will help you feel like a man again." It wasn't poetic. It wasn't cruel. It was just the truth, gift-wrapped with enough sarcasm to make it sting. That weekend, I went to a small get-together hosted by a coworker of mine named Dan, the quiet one who always offered to fix the jammed copier or stay late when someone needed a shift covered. We'd worked together for 4 years, barely exchanged more than polite hellos, but lately he'd started talking to me more, asking how I was holding up, complimenting my hair without being weird about it. That night, as we stood in the backyard while everyone else gathered around a fire pit, he handed me a drink and said, "You ever want to get out of here? Like, go somewhere quieter, let me know." He didn't push. He didn't assume. He just left the door open. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. There's something strange about being in between, no longer someone's wife, not quite someone else's anything, just yourself, raw and undefined. I wasn't rushing to fill the space he left behind, because for once, I liked the sound of my own breathing filling the room. I liked walking through a house that wasn't heavy with unspoken tension. I liked watching a movie without worrying whether the man beside me would roll his eyes at the genre. I liked Emma smiling more. I liked myself more. Maybe Rick will retaliate. Maybe he'll get nasty or dramatic or try to play the victim harder. Or maybe he'll just fade into the background, another man who mistook loyalty for weakness and was shocked when the woman he underestimated decided to walk away with everything she was ever denied. I don't know what happens next. Maybe Dan calls. Maybe I take a solo vacation. Maybe I just keep drinking my coffee alone, perfectly content with silence. What I do know is this: I'm not sorry. Not for the timing. Not for the method. Not even for the pettiness. They say revenge is best served cold. Personally, I prefer it with cream, no sugar, and a damn good lawyer.